All right, guys, we are looking at the level B activity for today. I wrote some steps off here to the side just to help organize the process. So I'll be referring to those as we work through some of these problems. So we're going to look at number 1 first. So I put on my steps, if the problem starts with a whole number, you're going to draw those first. So if you look at number 1 starts with a whole number 3. So we are going to draw 3 whole boxes to model 3 holes. Okay, so once you draw your 3 holes, the next step is we are going to find common denominators. So right now 3 does not have a denominator, so we're going to put 3 over 1. And then you would list the multiples of the denominator 1 and the second denominator 2. Okay, so multiples of 1. And then multiples of 2. So you can see as we're listing them that 2 is going to be our least common multiple, so it's going to be our smallest common denominator. So we are going to multiply the first fraction by 2, and the second fraction we are going to multiply by 1, which is just keeping it the same. So we are now looking at 3 times 2 is 6. And 1 times 2 is 2, so 6 over 2 divided by 1/2. Okay, so once you find common denominators, you are going to draw or model your first fraction. So this is our first fraction, 6/2, and our denominator is going to tell us how many to split our groups up into, or our holes up into. So our first 3 original boxes we're going to split into 2 because our denominator is 2, and then we are going to shade 6 of those because our numerator is a 6. So again, we are modeling our first fraction. Our next step is going to be that we are going to circle the groups of our second numerator. So our second numerator is a 1, so we're going to be circling groups of 1. Here's a 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, another. And then our last step is we are going to look at the circles for our answer. So we're going to see how many, these are all holes, so we're going to see how many holes that we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So our answer here would be 6. Okay, so now we're going to look at number 2. Number 2 is a little bit different than number 1 because we're not starting with a whole number, we're starting with a half. So if you go back to our steps, we're not going to draw the whole number first, we're going to start with finding common denominators. So you can list out the multiples of 2 and 4. Okay, 2, 4, 6, 8, and then, oops. You can already see that 4 is going to be our least common multiple. So we're going to make our denominators 4. So our first fraction, since our denominator currently is 2, we're going to multiply this whole first fraction by 2 so that we can get a denominator of 4. So our new fraction would be 2 times 1 is 2 over 2 times 2 is 4. Divided by, since our second fraction already has a denominator of 4, we are going to multiply it by 1, which would just keep it 1/4. Okay, so after we find common denominators, we are going to draw or model our first fraction. So our first fraction is 2/4, so we are going to draw fraction bar. Remember, our denominator tells us how many times we're going to split it, so we're going to split it into 4 pieces, and then our numerator tells us how many to shade, so we're going to shade 2 of them. Okay, after we have drawn or modeled our first fraction, we are going to circle groups of the second numerator. So our second numerator here is 1. Do a different color, 1. So we are going to circle groups of 1. So here's one hole, here's another one. And then we are going to look at our circles for the answer. We have two whole groups. So our answer here would be 2. All right, guys, so the next one we're actually going to do together is number 4. Since our answer for number 1 and number 2 is a whole number, I wanted you guys to see a little different answer. So we're going to do number 4 together, and then you will do 3 and 5 on your own, and you will check the key. So if you're looking at number 4, it does not start with a whole number, so we're going to skip that first step. It starts with a fraction, so we're going to find common denominators first. So if you list your factors of 4 and 2, which we did above, okay, and you can see that our least common multiple is 4. So we are going to actually multiply that first fraction by 1 because it already has a denominator of 4. And we're going to multiply the second fraction over here by 2 because we want that denominator to be 4. So we're multiplying the first fraction by 1, so we are getting 3/4 divided by, and then our second fraction, 1 times 2 for our numerator gives us 2, and 2 times 2 gives us 4. So we're doing 3/4 divided by 2/4. After we find common denominators, we are going to draw or model our first fraction. So our first fraction here is 3/4. So draw a bar. Remember, our denominator tells us how many times to split that up. So we're going to split it into 4. And then our numerator tells us how many times or how many boxes to shade, and that is 3. So that is a representation of 3/4. After we draw our first fraction, we are going to circle groups of our second numerator. Our second numerator is 2. So we are going to circle one group of 2, and then we still have one of the shaded ones left out, so we are going to circle another group of 2. Then we're going to look at our circles for the answer. So in our answer we have one whole group of 2, and then in our second circle we have one shaded out of 2, so a half. So our answer here would be 1 and 1/2. Okay guys, so for number 3 and number 5, I want you to try it on your own. You can use the steps and check your answer using the key that is in our Google Classroom on the activity that was posted for October 1st and September 30th, dividing fractions.